I'm Connor Ruebusch, and if you are interested in the finer points of face punching, you've come to the right place. This is Heavy Hands. Hello and welcome to Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Ruebusch. With me is Dr. Patrick Wyman, as always. And Pat, I can see Lucy's kind of circling your broadcasting position right now. We're only each allowed one co-host. So I just want to make sure that can you ask her to return, please, to her seat?
Lucy, you're going to need to stay right over there underneath the side table, which is currently on the floor of the kitchen because the carpet cleaners are here. So
very reasoned, well put. I can't wait until the video of her swearing angrily backstage comes out after this.
Jesus Christ. You should see the look she's giving me right now. She's literally side-eyeing me. It's really creepy.
All right. Welcome to Heavy Hands. Today, we have quite a few things to talk about. We will be getting to the results of UFC Gdansk, including the impressive upset, though not entirely unexpected if you listened to last week's show, of Darren Till over Donald Cerrone. But first, we want to get into next week's card, which really puts last week's card to shame, I think, in terms of lineup. Would you agree with that, Pat?
Yeah, I think this is one of the best cards they've put on Fox Sports 1 in quite some time.
I
think this is a really, really, really good card, pretty much from top to bottom. I'm not gonna bullshit any of y'all about how I feel about these cards, and this is a really, really, really good one.
Yeah, I agree. Basically from top to bottom, there's even a heavyweight who's just been signed on the curtain jerker fight named Marcelo, and I'm gonna pronounce his name Golem because it's funnier to imagine a heavyweight named Golem than it is one named Golem. But from top to bottom, there's something interesting about almost every fight. The main card in particular is very strong, and we're going to start with the main and co-main event. God damn it, Lucy. I have asked you once. She's going to have to be kicked out of the arena.
Yeah, this is not okay. This is not okay. We are going to catch her offering some slurs to the Chihuahua down the street before too long.
I know she's a star, but she can't do whatever she wants. God damn it!
My God, that is a series of increasingly deep cuts here.
Okay, so we're gonna start with the main and co-main event of what is this card being called? Let's see, UFC Sao Paolo again.
Yeah, UFC Fight Night Brunson versus Machida.
That works.
Coming to you live from. I was looking for the venue that this is being held in and couldn't find it. So that particular phrase lost some of its power. But it's a really freaking good card. It's got Derek Brunson versus Lyoto Machida at the top, Demian Maia versus Colby Covington, Pedro Munoz versus Rob Font, Francisco Trinaldo versus Jim Miller, our guy Jack Hermanson versus Thiago Santos,
sure.
John fucking Lineker, Vicente Luque, Jack Marshman versus Antonio Carlos Jr., which could be a freaking banger.
Elizio Zaleski dos Santos is always fun, and even Davison Figueiredo had an amazing UFC debut, a very fun fight, and Jared Brooks is a hypeable flyweight prospect. So,
the monkey god Jared Brooks.
Top to bottom, good shit. We're going to start off, though, with Brunson Machida and then Maia Covington in this first segment of today's show. Welcome, all of you, to Heavy Hands. Derek Brunson, Lyoto Machida. It has been, let's see, what's the total amount of time since Lyoto Machida was last in the octagon?
It has been almost 28 months.
Yeah. It takes me back to my earliest days as an MMA fan. Lyoto Machida was one of, if not my first favorite fighter. And I can say, Pat, I'm not super excited to see him come back as a 39-year-old after a 28-month layoff.
Yeah, this especially considering the two fights before that layoff were both brutal finishes.
Right.
That's he got absolutely shit kicked by Luke Rockhold, and then he was really competitive with Yoel Romero for the better part of 3 rounds, and then Romero just decided to finish the fight, just took him down and elbowed his face through the freaking canvas.
Yeah.
So, 2 years off, and he was looking. I think at least against elite competition, I thought he was looking a little washed before that 2-year layoff, and 2-year layoffs rarely help.
Yeah, I agree. Rockhold and Romero in particular, I think were both just. I mean, Machida has continued. He's a smart fighter, and he's not taken a lot of damage over the course of his career. And I think in some ways he has, in a lot of ways, he has continually sort of evolved and fine-tuned his game. Many fans will know already that he approached a lot of his more recent fights with a much more aggressive style than anyone who knew classic Lyoto Machida would have expected. We saw a much higher emphasis on power kicking, especially, taking advantage of that southpaw stance in a way that he rarely had before, launching that left body kick. His work with Rafael Cordeiro seemed to be having a positive influence on his game mentally. But physically, that was the real thing that stood out to me both in the Rockhold and Romero fights. That essentially when both of them decided they wanted to put Machida on his back and beat him up, they were both able to do it. And so that does give me some pause here, because while Derek Brunson, who has been famously knocked out by Robert Whittaker and is famously just insane and wild from time to time when he comes forward, while that does seem like a recipe for a potential Lyoto Machida knockout win, the insane intensity and the physical power of Derek Brunson make it, I don't know how Lyoto Machida can match up to that. I don't know how he can tie up with Derek Brunson and not get flung around unless he comes back looking much stronger than he did before, which doesn't seem too likely.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit a lot of the really important dynamics in this fight. I would say, can Brunson pressure the way that Yoel Romero pressured Lyoto Machida? I don't think so. I don't think he has that in his toolkit, because that was actually the best version of Romero's pressure I think that we've seen, in terms of constantly sticking after his opponent, doing a good job of cutting him off using kicks, and then picking his spots to throw at Machida without exposing himself to unnecessary danger. Mm-hmm. Like, that was actually, I think, Romero's smartest performance. Like, that was an incredible, and that should have showed us exactly how good Romero is. Like, I still don't think people fully appreciate how smart a fighter he is. And that fight should go a long way toward in large part because basically nobody watched that. It was like an out of the way fight night 2 weeks before the biggest card of 2015.
Yeah. So, and the things that were impressive about it were not like, I mean, the finish was obviously impressive, but up to that point, I think a lot of people could be forgiven for thinking that not much was happening.
Yeah.
But Romero was, I think, fighting towards that finish, even though it did not necessarily seem like he was putting a ton of pressure on Machida. He was always making Machida think about what might happen next.
Mm-hmm. It was about the best job anybody had done of effectively, intelligently pressuring Machida since Shogun Rua did it.
Sure.
Back in the day. It was a really, really, really solid performance from him. So with that said, where does that leave us with Machida? Well, I don't think Brunson can do that. And I don't think that Brunson has the grappling chops to dominate Machida if and when he gets him to the floor the way that Rockhold did. So, and Brunson is also uniquely vulnerable, as you pointed out, Connor, to Machida's counterpunching. Though, to be fair, we have not seen Machida really do a great job of counterpunching since the Ryan Bader fight. That was 5 years ago.
That is a very good point.
It has been 5 years since we've seen a vintage Machida vicious counterpunching performance.
Yeah.
We've seen instead a lot more, like you pointed out, the emphasis on power kicking, which is a more proactive thing. And in large part, maybe because Machida doesn't have the reflexes, doesn't have the timing, doesn't have the sense of distance, the speed to do what he used to do. So given that Brunson, even a more careful Brunson, like the ones that we've seen in his last two fights, is still going to give openings, can Machida exploit them without getting physically ragdolled whenever Brunson grabs a hold of him?
Right. Like if Derek Brunson just does exactly what he did to Robert Whittaker, I'm not confident that Lyoto Machida can do what Robert Whittaker did to punish him.
Absolutely can't. I'm extremely confident in saying that he can't do that at this point.
Yeah, he just. I think you raised a really good point there. I think there's a very good chance. It seems pretty likely to me that Lyoto Machida probably invested more in a more aggressive style because that allowed him to impose his striking skills on his opponents rather than having to react to what they were doing in real time. That allowed him to have the initiative, which it's a lot easier to always have the initiative in your corner if you're coming forward, if you're being aggressive. Controlling the initiative as a counterfighter, it takes sharp reflexes. It's kind of a young man's game. I think we see a lot of fighters do that. A lot of fighters will put in really gutsy come forward aggressive performances late in their careers for much the same reason.
Anderson Silva versus Michael Bisping.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
A really good example of that.
Absolutely.
It's like, well, I would say counterpunching is not necessarily a young man's game. I think it's an experienced but still fast guy's game.
Sure.
That you need to have a lot of depth of skill in order to be able to pull that off, which takes time to acquire. But you can't be so washed that your reflexes are not fast enough to anticipate the shots coming and then respond.
Yeah, and we can be frank here. I think Lyoto Machida, like we're probably not going to see more Lyoto Machidas in the future. I don't think Lyoto Machida's style was super flexible even at his peak. Like that, I think that sort of karate style of counterpunching in particular really does rely on reflexes. Like Machida's game was basically same time counters. Get in there as the person is coming towards you, create a massive collision. He was not a fighter who used all of his experience to, come up with different and creative ways to make you miss so that he could then repay you with his sharp footwork or whatever. Machida has never been a super nuanced defensive fighter. He has been a fighter who makes you chase him and then catches you when you do. And I think that in particular, that kind of counterpunching does rely a lot on speed and reflexes. And I don't think Machida has them anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point because despite the fact that Machida and Anderson had spent a long time together, they are not the same fighter at all.
No.
And so Anderson in particular always had a great deal more defensive acumen than Machida did.
Yeah.
Machida was always elusive. Being elusive is not the same thing as being hard to hit when you're cornered. Anderson was never easy to hit, even when you got him to that spot.
Yeah, it really comes down to who is harder to hit in the pocket. And in the pocket,
Yeah.
Anderson takes the cake by far.
Whereas if you could force Machida into the pocket, he was hittable there.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's kind of the key thing to bear in mind here is if Brunson can bull his way forward into a space where he can hit Machida, I think Brunson is going to be the favorite to win those exchanges because of his power, because of his speed, because of his physicality. And frankly, he's just younger and more durable at this point. He doesn't have as much tread taken off the tires,
Yeah.
So that's as far as that's concerned. I don't know, man. I see Machida's path to victory, but after 2+ years off, 2 really brutal losses before that, I have a hard time picking Machida and feeling confident about it.
I think this whole discussion for both of us has been painfully leading towards an inevitable pick for Derek Brunson.
Yeah, I mean,
I wish it were not so.
We both see Machida's path to victory here. It's pretty clear, right? Like Machida flattens Brunson coming in, or Machida is just too elusive for Brunson to get close to him and manages to keep his distance, forces Brunson into taking bad shots and bad clinch entries. Like the game plan is there.
Or
you can
go on. I'll let you finish. Sorry.
Or I mean, the game plan is there for him to do all that. That's not it's not that complex even. It's not hard to see what that looks like. It's just a matter of whether he can pull it off in the face of somebody who's younger, drastically more physical, a harder puncher shot for shot, who's not like a dumb fighter by any stretch of the imagination. Like Derek Brunson has a pretty good sense for what his game is and how to make it work.
Yeah, so that's actually the last thing I wanted to say is there is a possibility that Machida's reputation for being a dangerous counterpuncher, his well-known skill in that specific arena, does convince Derek Brunson to fight him the way he fought Anderson Silva. And if he does, then I think that is another way in which Machida can win. Because I can see Machida just lacing with body kicks. I can see Machida being a lot more willing to, even at this point, being more willing to get after Brunson than Anderson Silva was.
See, I disagree, and I'll tell you why. Because I just think Anderson Silva has always been more comfortable in that kind of fight than Machida has. And Anderson has shown in the past that he can comfortably win those kinds of close decisions. I mean, or not comfortably, he knows what to do to win rounds. And Machida, for all the improvements that he's made over the years, I do not think that Machida has ever really wrapped his head around what it means to win rounds.
That is a very good point.
That's I think winning rounds for Machida is always going to be a byproduct of him doing the things that he does and not a goal that he sets out for himself. Whereas Anderson, As much as Anderson occasionally looks like he's giving rounds away, Anderson, I think, still at some level in the back of his mind knows that he can win decisions. You know,
he's the master bullshitter, man.
Exactly, and I don't think that Machida's bullshit is built in. It's not a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's that contrast there. I think Brunson, if Brunson gets into the kind of fight with Machida that he did with Anderson, I think that's Brunson's fight.
Lucy agrees. She is going to have to be fined by the commission for this, though.
Yeah, Lucy has never watched a Lyoto Machida fight. Lucy was not alive the last time Lyoto Machida fought.
Well, Lucy's a savage, so I mean, my opinion of her has never been lower. So
yeah, that's fair. I think that's viable. She is a blood and soil nationalist. So take that as you.
All right, let's go ahead and get into. We may not finish it in this segment, our discussion, but let's talk about the co-main event. This one I think is, to me, this is a better fight. This is one that means a lot more for its division. It's not just sort of a find out where these guys are fight. Damian Maia had a really rough stylistic matchup on his hands with Tyron Woodley, but I thought still made a good account of himself in that bout. He looked as competitive as I think he could have been. He really went for it. He didn't look mentally broken as he has in, other well-known title fights. And Colby Covington, you and I have both said many times now, is kind of one of the guys we expect to be the future of this division. One of the guys who, much like Till Cerrone was last weekend, this is a fight that needs to happen. We need to have some of these old guys at the top start fighting these young up-and-comers. I think Colby Covington is ready for this kind of test, and I'm really curious to see how a battle between two such excellent wrestlers and grapplers plays out.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. It's a really fascinating matchup because on the one hand, you could just look at Maia and say, like, that was not a great performance against Tyron Woodley, but really, aside from maybe throwing more strikes, which he manifestly does not have the gas tank to do,
right? What
else was he supposed to do?
Right. He did what he could, man. He landed some really good shots. Like he kept the pressure on. He tried takedown after takedown after takedown, and at the end he started trying to pull guard. Woodley just refused to give him any of the opportunities he needed. And when you're like a 39-year-old dude who struggles to fight for 15 minutes, saying nothing for 25, then I don't know. I can't be too disappointed in how Maia looked in that fight. I thought he did a good job considering.
Yeah, no, not at all. There was not a whole lot else, really, that I thought Maia could have done against Woodley, who was just such a drastically better wrestler, so much faster, so much more physical, kept his hips so much lower. Like, he could have thrown a little bit more, but really, he didn't have the gas tank for that, and I think we all knew he didn't have the gas tank for that. Like, that was pretty much how that fight was going to go. I think we could have expected Woodley to throw a little bit more, but really, that was what Maia was going to do. Mm-hmm. He had one opportunity, which was in the first round when he almost got Woodley down and Woodley grabbed the fence. That was Maia's chance. It didn't happen, and then the rest of the fight was pretty much always going to look like it did.
Yeah.
So, but Colby Covington is not Tyron Woodley, and Covington's game is way, way, way different.
Yes.
Covington loves to get in your face. He loves to come after you. His game is really dependent on working takedowns and being in scrambles and doing a lot of, like, he's really good at wrestling from his knees. I think he's one of the very few wrestlers in MMA who actually does that really well. Like, he shoots, fails, and reshoots from his knees better than just about anybody. Like, great fireman's carry, things like that you don't really see very often in MMA. So there's a real question as to how that matchup is going to work for him. If Maia is still the same dude, if Covington wants to do that, then, man, that's Maia's world. That's his game.
Right. It's
But
fascinating because who else wrestles particularly well in like those chain positions when the first, second, and third shot have failed? Damian Maia.
Yeah,
it's something he does really well too.
Mm-hmm. So what that means here, I guess, is because that's Covington's game. That is the game he's always shown. He has never been the dude who's like, well, you're a pretty good defensive wrestler, so I'm just going to strike with you instead. Covington is a pressure in your face, chain takedowns together, beat you up in the clinch kind of dude. His game is predicated on punching his way into physical contact with you. And either he just completely abandons that, which has been his thing since the very beginning of his career, or he says, fuck it, I am who I am, and I'm going to make that game work against Damian Maia. That's kind of the baseline question in this matchup, because we know what Maia's going to do.
Right.
Maia's going to want to come out and engage him in that kind of fight. So what is Covington's response?
I think that the arc of Covington's career suggests even more strongly that he will do that because, as you said, he's a pressuring in-your-face kind of fighter. That has only intensified as his career has progressed. If we look at just a very simple measurement, if we look at fight metric numbers, his first 3 UFC fights, he was hovering around in the 10 to 20 range of significant strikes landed and scored 2 takedowns in 2 of those fights, 5 in one of the others. In his last 4 fights, he has, especially in the last 2, he landed 76 against Brian Barberena and 47 significant strikes against Dong Hyun Kim. He landed just about 20 or more in the last 2 fights before that, and he has not scored fewer than 5 takedowns in any of those fights. In the last 2, he scored 8 and 12. So basically, Covington's confidence is blossoming, and his output and aggression have only become more of a factor as a result.
Yeah, he's got incredible cardio. So
for sure,
the thing that strikes me about this is Maia can, if he wants to have that kind of fight with Maia can get him in the first, right? Like a healthy, strong Maia is a real threat to get to the back and finish Covington with an RNC in the first round. But if Covington could survive that space and keep fighting that same kind of fight into the second and the third round, I don't know if Maia could keep pace, even though that's Maia's kind of fight. Even though that's not traditionally how we've seen Maia gas himself out, I'm not sure he could keep pace with Covington in that kind of fight.
Yeah, and we still have. I think the grappling is a large part of what tired him out so badly in the Rory McDonald fight. He went into the second round gassed after, or actually ended the first round already looking exhausted, and much of that round was him threatening and controlling McDonald, who just made him work. Just made him scramble, made him move on the ground. And I think Covington is obviously at risk if he does that. Obviously, anytime you're making Damian Maia work on the ground, you are forcing him to do things that are bad for you. But the pace is the big factor. I totally agree with you. If we have to talk about, the things that hold Maia back, the things that he could not help about the Tyron Woodley matchup and many of his others, cardio, stamina, age, these are the things that he can't help at this point in his career. These are the reasons that he cannot fight. He does not have a ton of flexibility to how he can fight because he just can't exceed a certain number of strikes per minute or a certain number of shots attempted per minute. He has to take a breather. And Colby Covington is exactly the opposite. So while I agree, I would not at all be shocked if Damian Maia got a submission in the first round, I think as this fight goes on, it is going to become dramatically easier for Colby Covington, especially if it goes to the third round.
Yeah, and because, put it this way, Covington is a good enough wrestler. Covington is not like Ryan LaFleur, whose takedown defense was solely dependent on scrambling, right? And those are the kinds of guys that Maia has feasted on, who are not bad wrestlers and who are actually pretty good wrestlers, but they're the kind of wrestlers who do not necessarily excel at stuffing the first shot. Whereas Covington, I think if Covington plays it a little more careful than he normally does and he draws out a bad shot or two, I don't think there's any reason why Covington couldn't stuff them for Maia.
Yeah, I agree. And even though he's super aggressive, the scramblers, I think, struggle against Maia because a lot of them, they may not be papering over flaws necessarily, but they certainly are used to being able to kind of rush their way out of a bad position or catch the guy when he's not ready to have the position secured yet. And that's really the case with Maia. If he gets you down, he's already halfway there to securing the position. Covington is a step-by-step kind of wrestler. I think that's why his chain wrestling is so good. He is very methodical despite being such a fast-paced, aggressive fighter. And so, yeah, I think he can probably wrestle with Maia, even if he may not be super great at competing with him in the specific jiu-jitsu exchanges.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent way of putting it. I think Covington also benefits from being boys with Jorge Masvidal, who just fought Damian Maia.
Sure, yeah.
They have exactly the same coaching staff, including the same boxing coach. So, I really think that that's going to be an edge for Covington here too. I think this is going to be, I think, the first time we see Damian Maia get beaten in a matchup like the one that he wants.
Sure.
I think we're so used to seeing Maia dominate in those, but I think Covington, unless he gets caught, which is entirely possible, I just think this is a young, physically gifted, strong dude with an endless gas tank who loves to be in those kinds of grimy exchanges and who just excels at making you work in them. Like, man, I don't know. Am I talking myself into, like, there are two possibilities here. Like, one is, and maybe the more salient one, is that I'm talking myself into Covington. Like, I'm trying to find reasons to go for him, when really the basic answer is, if you engage in Maia's kind of fight, he's going to beat you.
Sure.
So those are the two possibilities. I don't think neither you or I sees Covington becoming a stick and move guy here, right?
No, but I do think, actually, I'll go ahead and make my pick then, and I do think this is like, there's no reason to expect this to happen, I guess, but Covington does like to hit people once they're worried about the takedown, and I can really imagine once Maia is gassed that he is going to get him reacting badly to shots and clip him on the chin and put him out in the third round. I think that's probably what I expect to happen.
You know what would be smart is for Covington to come out and like stick and move in the first round and just try to draw out a bunch of really bad shots.
Yeah.
And then once you have Maia tired, then go after him.
Sure.
In like the second and the third round. So you spend the first round sticking and moving, defending takedowns, keep your back to it, kind of let him shoot at you from too far away. Hit him in the clinch whenever you can. Just make him work. And then once you see fatigue start to set in, get after him, get aggressive, take him down, and try to beat him up in those kinds of transitional exchanges.
He might do it. I mean, we've said Covington has very much followed the path of the pressure fighter, but we have also praised the game planning of fighters at ATT before. We know their coaching staff really does a good job of studying footage. And again, like having had somebody who is a close friend and training partner of Covington already fight Maia, I would not be surprised if they come into this bout with more of a thoughtful approach. Not that pressure fighting isn't thoughtful, but an approach that is maybe a bit of a step away from just being a pressure fighter. That wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about this matchup, but I think it deserves it. It's a fascinating fight. Covington could be the dude. I think the next dude in that division is either going to be Covington or Usman, and I think this fight will tell us a lot about which one it's going to be. Yeah,
and hey, Till just beat Donald Cerrone, right? Like these matchups with the young, fresh-faced kids fighting the established contenders, they happen for a reason. And I think this is very much in the same vein. I think it is very much a fight in which Colby Covington could announce himself as a top contender in the welterweight division.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Till here coming up in just a bit, though. He is, that boy.
That boy. Okay, well, let's take a break there. We're both going with Covington. Is that the consensus?
Yeah, even though it feels a lot like I'm talking myself into it.
Yeah, no, I know that feeling. Best not to dwell on it too much. You'll drive yourself crazy. When we come back from this break, we are going to talk about 3 of the other fights from this card that titillated our interests, namely Munoz versus Font, Trinaldo versus Miller, and John fucking Lineker versus Vera. We'll get to that after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. And welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's go ahead and dive into the first fight on the docket here. Pedro Munoz is taking on Rob Font in a bantamweight contest. Your thoughts on the matchup?
I love this fight.
Me too.
Absolutely love this fight. I really enjoy both of these dudes. Rob Font, seriously talented. Pedro Munoz, guy I had my eye on for a very, very long time. He never really broke through as kind of the blue chip guy he was maybe touted as by me, among other people. But he has turned into an excellent fighter and a really exciting, fun fighter as much as anything else.
Yeah.
So this strikes me as what promises to be a pretty dang fun matchup in a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I agree. Rob Font has, I think, really made a name for himself as it's kind of crazy, right? Because you look at the man's early career, and it's mostly decisions, a couple finishes in there. He's a goddamn puncher in the UFC. I mean, he really messes people up when he catches them with his hands. And I think that Rob Font is maybe one of the best examples in this division of like a developing boxer puncher. somebody who has a well-rounded, technical, thoughtful game, who relies on skill and agility to outmaneuver their opponents and outthink them, but who can really, really sit down in the pocket and exchange with relatively little fear, because he knows that people have to respect his power. And that makes for a really interesting matchup with Pedro Munoz, who, as you said, has not really filled out as the blue chip prospect that many of us thought he would be, mostly because he is phenomenally hittable, but is still an incredibly tough man for basically anybody in the division to fight, because he's tough, he's determined, he is extremely aggressive, he has excellent conditioning, so he does not slow down, he will keep pushing a pace no matter whether he's hitting you or you're hitting him. And as an opportunistic submission finisher, he is among the best at bantamweight.
Yeah, in a division that is full of a lot of really, really good grapplers, everybody from T.J. Dillashaw to Aljamain Sterling to a whole bunch of those dudes, Munoz might actually be the most dangerous submission guy in that division. He's up there. Like, look at the top 15 in the bantamweight division, and tell me which of those dudes outside of Aljo, I think, is an unequivocally more dangerous submission artist.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to argue with that. I mean, maybe not. Possibly just because he doesn't seem to press the ground game as much as he maybe should in a lot of his fights. But if you give Pedro Munoz your neck, like his guillotines are so quick. I mean, just deadly.
Yeah, he's got a great leg lock too that he doesn't go to all that much, but like the dude is a really phenomenal grappler. Like he was a world no-gi champion back in the day. So as far as what that means for this fight, Font is not a good defensive wrestler. Like he's not a real good one. He pretty much everybody who has tried to take him down has been able to.
Takedown defense per fight metric is 20%.
Yeah, I mean, look at Font's takedown. Douglas Silva de Andrade, not exactly like a power wrestler, did not have much trouble getting him to the mat in that fight. Now, the problem is going to be for Munoz to get close enough to shoot those takedowns, because Font has a real nice jab and is more than willing to use it. He's long. He throws a real nice 1-2, and he pushes a pace. He moves pretty well. He's got pretty good footwork. Like, the question is really, is Munoz going to be able to get inside to work the kind of game that he wants to work, or is he going to get caught on the outside? If Munoz does get caught on the outside, what are his kicks going to do?
What is your opinion of Font scrambling after he is taken down?
I think that if you're scrambling with Pedro Munoz, you're losing. I think Font is a good scrambler, but I don't think you want to be scrambling with Munoz because he, like you pointed out, his front headlock is just so good. And Munoz is a really pretty dang good wrestler too. When he gets in on a shot, when he sets it up well, he knows how to finish. I mean, like he's the problem for him is more like setting up his shots. And that's what gives me pause in thinking about Font and thinking about Font's length, that Munoz is a guy who kind of struggles to set up his shots and get in on his shots in the first place. And Font has like a 2-inch height advantage and a substantial reach advantage. Yeah.
71-inch reach for Rob Font versus 64 for Pedro Munoz.
Yeah.
That's a pretty phenomenal reach advantage.
Yeah. So I understand why Font is the favorite. I think Font should win the fight, but I absolutely see how Munoz does it. I think that's true of a lot of fights on this card. Like, you see the favorites' path to victory. You understand why they're the favorite. They should win, but you also see a lot of really, really, really live dogs.
Yeah, I call that good matchmaking, man. That's why I like this card so much.
Yeah, I mean, this is like really and truly. I've said this a whole bunch of times, but I don't think it can be said enough, because we're often critical of the UFC, and I would say not overly so, but rightly so.
Yeah.
The job that Shelby and Mick Maynard have done matchmaking for cards like this is phenomenal. These cards are exactly what they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like, this is this is what the UFC should be trying to do, is to create as many matchups like this as possible. So props to them for that. I guess I'm going with Font, but with a strong Munoz sense for how Munoz could win.
Yeah, I totally agree. That would be exactly my pick. Same language and everything. I think that Rob Font, the one thing that is strong, most strongly in his corner in this fight, his biggest edge in this fight, I think, is his ability to think tactically about what he's doing. to know that there is a certain way you approach certain opponents, whereas Pedro Munoz more and more seems to approach every opponent exactly the same way. Come forward, soak up as much damage as possible, and look for an opportunity to finish with a guillotine while landing as many low kicks and counter right hands and elbows as you can. And considering the reach advantage of Font, added to the fact that he is that boxer-puncher type. He knows he can stand in the pocket and land a good counter or two. He can throw a tight combination, but he also knows that it is best for him to keep people at the end of his reach. I got to go with Rob Font with the same caveats that you gave.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it all makes sense. So now we got John Lineker versus Marlon Vera.
We had Francisco Trinaldo versus Jim Miller before that.
That is a hell of a fight.
I'm not sure what that noise was.
That's my. I love both of these kind of like fringe top 15 lightweights, and appreciate what they bring to a television screen.
I just imagined, sort of Patrick Wyman's like glasses flipping up and down. Just
I'm wearing a propeller hat, and I'm wearing a propeller hat, and the propeller starts going.
That was the sound of steam coming out of Patrick Wyman's ears.
Yeah, lifts me up out of the chair. I love both of these guys, and I love this fight. It's a great matchup. Like, what do you make of it, Connor? Who do you like here?
This is tough for me to call, man. Jim Miller has looked really good to me. I don't think he does not. In fact, the opposite. He hasn't lost a step. I think since discovering the Lyme disease, he has continued to re-hone and sharpen his game and become a lot more comfortable with his skills. He had a really hard time with Anthony Pettis. I think Jim Miller is always going to suffer for being not a particularly good defensive fighter. Usually his reactions to being attacked are to get out of range as quickly as possible. That allowed Pettis...
Or to throw back.
He'll exchange or he'll hop out, but he's not going to slip and make you miss and outmaneuver you. That kind of stuff allowed Pettis to pressure him. When really, I think we all agreed going into that fight, Miller could only win if he pressured Pettis. And I can imagine Francisco Trinaldo doing a lot of the same things to Jim Miller. Not because he is... in a lot of ways, like Anthony Pettis is not necessarily a better technical fighter than Jim Miller. He's not necessarily sharper with all of his techniques, but he is absolutely willing to just let it go. And Trinaldo is willing to let that left kick in particular go. He is willing to counter whenever somebody throws at him. He's a lot more comfortable letting his opponent come to him and then swinging back than I think Miller is, where I think Miller often swings back out of sort of anxiety about the exchange. Trinaldo is a much more natural counterpuncher, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and in a southpaw-southpaw matchup also.
Always my favorite in MMA, by the way. I think southpaw versus southpaw almost always results in a banger in the sport of MMA.
Yeah, I agree with you here. I like Trinaldo a little bit, though with the caveat that if Miller could get his takedown game going, I think Miller could finish Trinaldo on the mat without if he can create a scramble and grab a guillotine or get to Trinaldo's back. But as a striking matchup, yeah, I think it's Trinaldo's fight to lose. I think he's the bigger puncher, the more comfortable throwing combinations, slightly better technical footwork. I think he moves a little bit better than Miller does. But it's a great fight. Like, it's exactly what we were talking about, one where both guys have real clear paths to victory for how it would look. It's just a good fight. It's a real good fight.
Yeah, well, what was I want to talk about Trinaldo's evolution a little bit. I mean, you had an opinion I think you shared recently on the coaching of Andre Dida. How much do you think that style comes through? Because, like, we have seen a lot of good things out of Evolution Tai, out of that
it's
gym.
A really good gym. It's like, I don't think Dida gets enough credit for being a really, really good coach and for having been a really good coach for a long time, too. Because remember, he coached Shogun during his title run. That was a lot of Andre Dida's handiwork. I think when you look at Dida's guys throw, it doesn't always look super pretty,
right?
But the underlying fundamentals in terms of weight transfer are pretty good. I think he teaches counterpunching really well. I think he teaches footwork well. I think his guys are always efficiently getting from point A to point B. And I think you see that, I think you see that really clearly with Francisco Trinaldo, because Trinaldo, back when he was like on The Ultimate Fighter and a little bit before then, so what was now a pretty dang long time ago, Trinaldo was a banger, but he always had power. He was always athletic. He was always fast. But he was not an especially slick fighter. Mm-hmm. And now you can kind of miss Trinaldo's slickness because you see him throwing with power, because you see him throwing good combinations. What's really slick about Trinaldo are his feet. And that came through really clearly in that fight with Chad Laprise, where he just knocked Laprise's block off. Because Laprise is a guy with pretty good footwork, and Trinaldo was consistently getting to the angles first. He was consistently finding the blind angles from which to throw. He was consistently finding the right distance on a guy who was supposed to be a smooth, technical outside kickboxer, you know?
Yeah, this might sound like a very strange comparison, but the Laprise knockout and several other things in Trinaldo's recent run have really reminded me of the kind of stuff that Manny Pacquiao does. Mm-hmm. Like the flashing of the lead hand. He's very left-hand centric still, as Manny Pacquiao was for much of his career. But, or almost even, like, this is also a very strange comparison to another boxer, but now I'm blanking on his name. Superman. What's Superman's name?
Superman.
Yeah, hold on.
Adonis Stevenson?
Adonis Stevenson, that's the one. Like, very left-hand centric, likes to counter, but does a great job of sort of just annoying the shit out of his opponents with his lead hand to get his feet into position to land the left. The Laprise fight, I recall, he had that flashing jab that was just constantly buzzing in Laprise's face. And if I recall correctly, he got himself to a short little inside angle, kind of faded away back to his left behind that right hand so he could then launch the left over Laprise's right shoulder. And that kind of stuff really is really difficult for most of Trinaldo's opponents to deal with. He does a great job of moving himself into positions to land. He's a much smarter fighter than I think he's usually given credit for.
A really crafty fighter and a well-trained fighter.
Absolutely.
That's I think we are going to be Francisco Trinaldo's fan club.
I have been already for many years now.
Yeah, like the fight, his performance against Paul Felder was really good. Against Yancy Medeiros was really good. Like he has been a reliable fringe top 15 lightweight for a while here. Like the dude is legit.
Hell yeah, and he's fun as hell to watch. Like Masar Anduba is the shit. Jim Miller should not be counted out here. Jim Miller, as I said, like still sharp. I'm not confident that Jim Miller has the right style to trouble Trinaldo. I'm not confident that he can get him down that easily, and I'm not confident that he can dictate the pace and range of this fight against a much more comfortable counter fighter.
I mean, Kevin Lee, who has made improvements since he fought Trinaldo, but Lee had to really muscle to get takedowns on Trinaldo, and Lee is a muscle takedown guy. Yes. You know, like that is a dude who has a tremendous amount of strength. He is really viciously, brutally strong, and I'm not sure that Miller has that kind of combination of the smooth entries on the takedowns plus the raw strength that a guy like Lee does.
Because you either need a really smooth entry to catch Trinaldo when he's planted or when he's in the midst of a strike,
like how Ross Pearson got him down when they fought.
Right, yeah. Or you need you're going to need to be really strong, because no matter what, you're usually going to have to battle Trinaldo's footwork to make your wrestling work. You're going to have to get into range. You're going to have to get to the right angle. And so either the shot is going to be mostly dead by the time you get there and you got to muscle it to finish it, or you just have to time it perfectly so he's out of position. And I'm not sure that Jim has either of those skills really at the top of his list.
Yeah, so I agree with that. So I like Trinaldo by a bit here, but again, with the strong caveat that you see how Miller wins it.
Of course, yeah. Once again, good matchmaking. And once again, we're going to take a break. And why don't we get into JFL versus Marlon Vera after we return, and then we will talk about the massive upset that probably very few people experienced or witnessed, Darren Till knocking out Donald Cerrone after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
And we are back. John fucking Lineker. Pat, he returns to fight Marlon Vera. I feel like I have to I have to play the role of the guy who opposes John Lineker because no one else does. But let's be honest, John Lineker's awesome. I'm very excited to see him back in the cage, and I'm very excited to see him. Honestly, I'm excited to see John Lineker not continue to fight like top 5 bantamweights all the time. Because I don't think that he can technically or strategically compete with the likes of TJ Dillashaw or Cody Garbrandt or Dominic Cruz, the big 3, of course. I think he can be outthought a little too easily, but I think you put him against fighters who make mistakes and you always get an amazing fight.
Yeah, and Marlon Vera, while a really fun fighter who's put together some really good wins, is a guy who makes mistakes and a guy who lets himself be pressured and pushed back to the cage. Yeah. So I think what we're going to see is John Lineker absolutely wailing on him. I got my L's and my W's confused. I think we're going to see Lineker absolutely wail on this dude. But he's also going to get hit. We know that because he's John Lineker. So we're going to get some real fun back and forth exchanges up to the point where I would say Lineker clocks him.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, this recalls Lineker font to me. Like Marlon Vera is developing the kind of game that could work against a fighter like John Lineker, especially in that Brian Kelleher fight. You know, Kelleher likes to put a lot of pressure on, and while Vera got cornered against the fence and had to fight his way out a few times, his jab looked better than it ever has. He did a much better job of staying constantly on his bike to refuse Kelleher the chance to set up in front of him when he was against the fence. Little things that are improving over time are turning him into a more effective outfighter, but much as with Rob Font, doing those things under duress is another matter. And there's no duress like that which John Lineker puts on you.
Yeah.
Because we said many times, right? We said
that's
many times that John Lineker is not a fighter you can scare. You just can't make him scared. And so many fighters rely on putting fear into their opponents by landing one good shot or threatening them with their feints or whatever. You have to frustrate Lineker. And to frustrate a fighter like Lineker, who is so committed to coming forward, to cutting you off, to hitting you in the body, to responding with combinations every time you throw one punch, you have to fight a relatively perfect fight. You have to really, really stick to the right game plan to make that work. And that takes a lot of experience.
Yeah, even John Dodson, who is a guy who did a really good job of sticking to his game plan in that fight against Lineker, could not necessarily win that fight. That was a close decision. I understand people who scored it for Dodson. I scored it for Lineker, but I get it. You know, like that. But even that was really, really, really tough. Vera, I don't think there's any reason to expect Vera to be able to sit on his bike for 15 minutes and stick and move as Lineker tries to bull him. You know, with that said, he's going to hit Lineker as he comes in. He's going to lace him with shots. Lineker's going to have to dig into his bag of tricks a little bit. But I think what we've seen from Lineker is that his bag of tricks is deep. He is not a one note puncher. He can do a lot of different things and do them pretty dang well. Even though to some extent I think he's been supplanted by our friend Jessica Andrade in terms of the short whirling dervish power puncher category. Like we used to I think he's now kind of a poor man's Jessica Andrade instead of the other way around. Irony of ironies.
Don't let anyone on Twitter hear you say that.
I think I'm going to be honest with you. I think the crowd that loves John Lineker also loves Jessica Andrade.
Yeah, probably.
So take that as you will. But but I think that's going to make this a really, really fun fight. Lineker should win this. He's like a 4-1 favorite with good reason. But it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and especially if it does end up going to the ground. For me, I'll be watching this one with an eye for any changes in Lineker's game because I'm still interested in the idea. Like Lineker's still only 27. I think he still has time to, even though he has been fighting a lot since 2008, he has a shitload of fights in his record for such a short career. I want to see if he can start to develop his game a little more. I want to see if he can rely on his jab a little more as he's pressuring. I want to see if he can create some more angles to avoid just having to stand right in front of his opponent in order to put himself in position to hit them. This may not be the fight. I mean, again, I don't think it's the fight where he's going to need any of that to win. I think he can just be JFL and probably get Vera out of there without too much trouble, while of course absorbing shots. But I have more faith in his ability to do that than I do Marlon's. But I would like to see Lineker's game evolve. I don't want him to just be JFL for the rest of his career, because he has some remarkable physical qualities that really could make him a contender. I think he's insanely tough. He has huge power in his hands. He is unbreakable mentally, and that is a quality that very few fighters have. Even fighters who have to be more unbreakable as a rule than normal people. Lineker sits kind of at the top of the heap. So
yeah, no disagreement from me. Were there any other fights we wanted to talk about on this card?
I mean, we can give some shout-outs to ones that are fun, but otherwise I think we're moving on to UFC Gdansk.
Yeah, keep your eyes on Vicente Luque versus Nico Price.
For sure.
That should be fun. Davison Figueiredo versus Jared the Monkey God Brooks. That is a really fun flyweight matchup. Thiago Santos versus Jack Hermanson. Also, shout-out to my guy, Jack the Hammer Marshman, fighting Antonio Carlos Jr. Marshman is probably going to get taken down in RNC with a quickness, but I love Marchman's style. I love the way he throws hands. Like, that dude is just fun as hell.
And knowing the career of Shoeface Antonio Carlos Jr., Jack Marshman's exactly the type of dude who might knock him out with another Ladbrokes chip shop kick, like Dan Kelly did.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
He absolutely could.
Yeah. Okay, so we got a big thing to talk about before we finish, and that is Donald Cerrone versus Darren Till.
Yep. Thank God we said we wouldn't be shocked at an early finish for Darren Till, huh? Because he just went out there and finished Donald Cerrone. The big thing about this fight that I really want to discuss is, do you feel that you have learned anything new about Darren Till given this performance, or are you kind of in the same place on him as you were before the bout?
No, I felt like I learned new things about Darren Till. I thought I learned that that his preference for sitting back is just that, a preference. It's not a built-in feature of his game.
Sure.
That he can lead really well when he wants to. That he can pressure. That he can pressure really effectively. That we know that he knows how to smell blood. We know that. We know that he's got power. We know he's big and strong and fast. A hell of an athlete. We know all that. But the ability to pressure that effectively, because Cerrone is not that easy to pressure. Like,
not anymore. He's not as easy as he used to be.
Yeah, this is to pressuring Donald Cerrone in 2017 is not the same thing as pressuring Donald Cerrone in 2011 or 2015 even.
Yeah.
Like, it is harder to pressure him now than it was. So the fact that Till was able to do that effectively, land those shots that effectively, pick the right shots at the right times that effectively, that said something really meaningful to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. The thing that, I mean, does still give me some concerns that I still didn't learn anything about Darren Till's gas tank. I don't know if the pace which he pushed in the first round here, which, as you rightly pointed out, was a lot faster and more centered on the idea of pressure and aggression, I'm not sure if that would have had an even stronger impact on his performance in the later rounds. So I still don't know how Darren Till can compete with people who can force him into long and fast-paced fights. But it was really nice to see that Darren Till, when matched with an opponent who he really needs to pressure early to be effective against, he can do it. And he can do it.
A lot about his smarts, right?
Yes.
That's a trade-off you take against Donald Cerrone. You're going to have, we talked about this before the fight, but you know, when you're fighting Cerrone, you've got 5 good minutes to really get your game together before he becomes exceptionally dangerous. You know, before he starts to figure you out, before he puts all of those dozens of fights to good use and starts to break you down, as we've seen. before you show his corner, which is an excellent corner, all of the things that you got about 5 minutes to really make that happen. Till it's one thing to know that, it's another to be able to translate that into effective action in the cage, right? And Till did that really effectively. That's the thing, is we've seen guys try to do that to Cerrone before and not be able to do it.
Yeah,
you know, like it's not as simple. You know, I was tweeting about this and I saw a lot of comments like, well, everybody knows to pressure Cerrone. Yeah, but not everybody does it. Not everybody does it effectively. Matt Brown knew he had to do it, and Matt Brown didn't win the first round of that fight.
Right.
Like, you know, that's like, that stuff is it is not a given that knowing to pressure Donald Cerrone means that you're going to have success doing it.
Yeah, especially because Cerrone was, I mean, I was ready for the fight to turn. Just based on how the first round was playing out, I was thinking, if Till doesn't get the knockout here, he's in trouble, because Cerrone was doing exactly what John Jones did to Daniel Cormier in their rematch. He was targeting almost exclusively the legs and body of Darren Till and landing a lot. Good body punches, good kicks to both the legs and the body. He was doing all he could to accept the fact that he was probably going to lose the first and set himself up to win the rest of the fight. And Darren Till just stuck to him. He did a really great job sticking to him. I still have concerns. Like, if somebody other than Donald Cerrone can pile up that kind of attritive damage early, then Darren Till might be in serious trouble in the second, third, fourth, fifth rounds. But that was a wise risk to take against Donald Cerrone, especially when you're in Darren Till's position, when you're a relatively young and untested fighter who has accepted a very risky, massive step up in competition on short notice, 2 months after having your lead leg battered to pieces by Bojan Veličković. You come in here and you say, you know what? I got to get him out early if I can. And he did it. So praise to Darren Till. As he said he would be, he looked fucking great in the fight. That's the best scouser I can do.
Yeah, I mean, who do you want to see him fight next, Connor? What, like, if you're trying to fantasy book Darren Till here, if you're trying to pick out what happens next, who do you want?
Yo, Mike Perry, right? That's who he called out after the fight. Why the hell not? I would happily see Darren Till against any fighters like him. I would like to see Darren Till, like, I don't mind if he takes a little step back. He filled in here. Hopefully the UFC will be grateful for that. Though, you know, God knows they rarely seem to be. But I don't think he needs to be pushed right into big serious matchups right now. I think fighting guys like Mike Perry, fighting guys like Nordine Taleb or Santiago Ponzinibbio, fighting people who will engage with him in a fun kickboxing match, I think we will get to learn a lot more about the things that we really need to know about Darren Till, which is, when faced with a similarly dangerous striker, can he keep up a pace to compete with them for 3 to 5 rounds?
See, I would kind of go the opposite direction. I think he's got a fair bit of experience. I think he is young enough that he could rebound from a loss to a top fighter and not have it destroy his confidence. I would like to see him versus the Thompson-Masvidal winner in a 5-round main event.
Boy, that does sound good.
That's the fight that I want, because I think that the Lawler Dos Anjos winner should get the shot. Should get the shot at Woodley.
Sure, and then maybe if Till beats the winner of that fight, then maybe he has to fight whoever comes out on top between Covington and Usman.
Yeah, if we can ever get something along those lines. Yeah, I mean, like, of all the dudes that we're talking about here, Perry is the one I think with the most upside and who I am least sold on getting there. Like, this is like, I have been a believer in Mike Perry's talent since the first moment I saw him fight. But I think that's the dude where he should be taking steps back and taking time before pushing him up, because Perry is so much rawer. Like, Perry has only been fighting for like 3 years professionally and does not have a lot of experience. I don't think he's an exceptionally well-trained fighter, to be honest. And I think he has a ton left to learn, and he should be getting that experience by putting him in there with like kind of well-rounded veterans and guys who are going to be in fun fights, just to give him time in camps. Whereas Till, while not like older, Till is only 24, but Till has like 4.5 years of professional experience. He had a Muay Thai career before that. He's got he now has like 15 pro fights. Like, Till, I think, is much better prepared for those challenges at the top of the division, and he also has, I would say, I think he's a better marketing play for you in the long run.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So. That's kind of why I think I'm okay with Till Perry, because I feel pretty confident that Till would win that fight. But Perry is exactly the kind of guy who could really give Till problems if he gets overconfident down the stretch. Perry is so insanely tough that we have seen him go through hell to land late knockouts before. Like, it might be similar to the hot chocolate fight, the Danny Roberts fight.
Well, Darren Till and Mike Perry, that would be. I would not turn my nose up at that fight. Don't get me wrong.
Nor the pre-fight buildup, right?
Holy crap! Yeah, I mean that actually maybe should be the fight that they do.
I mean, it just sounds fun.
Who's Perry scheduled to fight? He's got a fight booked.
Ponzinibbio.
Ooh, the Pawns.
Who is probably will probably just be a less interesting person to do similar things to Perry that Till would do, right? Like, I think Ponzinibbio will just kind of quietly outstrike Mike Perry, and Darren Till would just loudly outstrike Mike Perry. So
yeah, I really hope this is terrible to say. I really hope that fight gets pulled for some reason, because I think that Till Perry is so obviously the fight to make here.
Yeah, like, I do like the Pawns though.
You're talking to a longtime Pawns backer here. We are both card carrying members of the Santiago Ponzinibbio fan club.
He just has a bit of
hogs and everything.
He just has a bit of Rafael dos Anjos syndrome. He's just too normal, despite being a very good fighter.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think like there are a lot of guys like Santiago Ponzinibbio in the world. There are not a lot of guys like Darren Till and Mike Perry.
Right, I agree.
Which is unfortunate. I mean, that's kind of what this sport is. But like, Till Perry is their best chance at making a genuine from scratch kind of star, because the build for that would be so good. Like, those are dudes you could get out there, you know?
You could make that a main event on a Fox Sports 1 show or whatever. Put it on free TV. People would watch it.
Put it on Fox. I don't think you put it on Fox Sports 1. I think you put it on I think that's a Fox main event.
Why not, man? Sounds like a great fight. Any other little brief mentions we want to give to the rest of this? Karolina Kowalkiewicz leaning further into the idea of being an aggressive pressure fighter. Seeming to,
I like that for her.
Yeah, and seeming to get more powerful with time, sitting down at her punches more and more with each fight. I like that a lot.
Well, for a long time, your critique of her, which was a correct one, was that her upper body and her lower body were always doing different things. Yeah. And now that's not the case anymore.
Right. Yeah. She's not like the most technical puncher in the world, but she is at least using her legs to throw her weight into her punches.
Exactly.
And you can see the impact is a lot more visible, even from, the couch. You can feel the impact in those punches a lot more than you used to. Oscar Pichota is a guy that we did not talk about on last week's show. I had not watched much footage at the time we recorded, and now I regret it, because Oscar Pichota is legit. He's a very technically sound, well put together fighter who seems to have a game that works in every phase and in almost every position. He did have a little trouble at times with, I think, the athleticism of Jonathan Wilson, the power, the speed, the durability. Wilson just did not react in the way that less experienced opponents usually have to Pichota's sharp striking, and was able to repay him in kind for a few of the clean shots that Pichota landed. But Pichota stayed smart and stayed sharp for 15 straight minutes and won a very convincing decision.
Yeah, I thought there was basically nothing bad to take from Pichota's performance, aside from maybe the fact that he might be a little physically outclassed by guys like Wilson. But Wilson is a really good athlete, a really, really good athlete. So, like, I don't think that's a huge knock. Also, Pichota's only 27. I think if he gets on a really good strength and conditioning program, he's the kind of dude where he has physical potential that's still untapped. Like, I don't think he's fully filled his frame out. I think especially his legs, he could put quite a bit more muscle on and get a little more explosive. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, I agree.
But from a talent perspective, whoo boy, just great instincts.
Yeah.
Really good instincts, high fight IQ, makes good decisions.
Excellent footwork, really good, just a really good sense of distance and positioning. Like the way he was drawing Wilson into following him, but always keeping him just at the right distance where Wilson would have to overextend to reach him. That was amazing. Like, honestly, you don't see enough of that kind of stuff in MMA. The things we used to complain about not being present in MMA striking are slowly changing. Jab was always the answer when somebody would say, what's the most underused strike in MMA? You can't say that anymore, right? Like, a lot of good fights on this card Andre Fili beating Artem Lobov largely with the jab, busting up his face with his left hand. Pichota doing similar things to Wilson, landing that jab. Darren Till using a great jab against Donald Cerrone. But still, we don't see a lot of people who have an excellent sense for how to position themselves to land and avoid strikes on the feet. And those are the kind of things that I personally tend to look for in an up-and-comer. I want to see them just have a sense for distance. I want to see them know when to cut an angle rather than retreating in a straight line. I want to see them understand from the beginning how far away their opponent is and how to keep him there. And Pichota has all those skills. So I think that's about all we really need to cover from UFC Gdansk. Darren Till got the big upset, and man, what a thing, right? The welterweight division, we said last week, it needs to be shaken up. We need to see these young guys getting in there. It has now begun. It is happening. Soon we'll have Covington versus Maia. Darren Till already started what could be an avalanche of new contenders in the top 10 of an aging division. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Before we wrap up, Pat, what do you have coming out this week?
Oh boy, I don't really think I have that much coming out this week. It's kind of a light one. I'm working on a whole bunch of stuff for things moving forward.
It's all right if you don't have anything. I mean, it's cool.
I'm trying to think. I think I'll probably have a post up on Deadspin about the last 2 episodes of Tides of History that I did, but I think that's really about it. Otherwise, I'll probably get a head start on writing about the fantastic UFC 217 card coming up weekend after next.
Sure, yeah. As for me, I'm just going to tell people to keep their ears peeled for a bonus episode that will be dropping soon. We had Robert Follis, more or less the head coach over at Extreme Couture, who guided Kevin Lee to a very impressive performance against Tony Ferguson just a couple of weeks ago now, and has done a lot of fantastic things in the sport of MMA for a very long time. Over 20 years at this point, I think he has been training and teaching the arts of mixed martial. It was a really, really good interview. I just have to do some editing to clean it up for ease of listening, but as soon as that's done, keep your eyes open for that on the Heavy Hands Patreon. For $3 subscribers, it's going to be an episode up there, and hopefully in the future that would also be turned into a write-up, an article using sources from the interview. But if you want to hear the whole interview, all of the actual content that we discussed, check it out on Patreon coming this week. And that is about it for us. Find us on social media with your questions, concerns, comments, and of course your praise, as always. We're both on Twitter. I am at BoxingBush, that's BUSCH, and Pat is at Patrick_Wyman. And you can also find the both of us on Facebook, facebook.com/Patrick Wyman MMA or facebook.com/Conor Ruebusch MMA. Check out our work on Bloody Elbow for me, and Pat is doing stuff over at Deadspin, as he said, and of course the Tides of History podcast. And we will catch you guys next time. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.